Before we get into the video, I need you guys to do me a favour. Number 1, like the video. Also comment, let me know your thoughts on the story. Known as the Black Hill Butcher for his sick and depraved torture practices, Glasgow gangster and barbaric enforcer Martin Hamilton was a danger, more specifically, a very big danger to men. As a man, Martin was known to our victims, other male gangsters and men who were either in debt or low-level dealers that he commanded. He was essentially R-ing his own men. Brawny men were said to have been routinely frozen in fear while staring down the barrel of GUNs and told to either take off their clothes or get down on their knees and lick his boots, or even worse, tell Martin Hamilton directly that his acts were consensual, as some men were told that if they did not comply, Martin Hamilton promised to K them. Martin Hamilton then subjected Glasgow men, Edinburgh men, to prolonged and sadistic practices, a deprived act to demasculate men and turn them into a shell of their former selves. Imagine your manhood being taken with such ferocious force. Police believe that Martin Hamilton, the Black Hill Butcher, had used the R practice in order to control the drug trade in both Glasgow and Edinburgh and also fulfill his twisted desires. Police also believe that Martin in some capacity was laying the foundation to take over the highly profitable drug trade so that associate Paul Ferris could take control upon his release from England. That was because he was in jail, of course. Now, Martin Hamilton had been shot on 2 separate occasions when he returned to his home. That's how much he was hated. Now, a victim called John Carmichael was one of the many men who were odd. Both John and Martin Hamilton were in Dumfries prison together during the 1990s. Martin Hamilton had been jailed in 1984 for 6 years after he had used a tool to disfigure a known rival when he refused to stop selling gear. Now, despite police knowing that Martin had a liking towards men and was considered to be a swine, the Glasgow gangster was able to act as a listener. A listener was someone who provided support for vulnerable inmates that were younger. Now, Martin's cell was just 2 doors down from John's. Now, rather than helping John Carmichael, Martin actually demanded John to smuggle gear into the jail while on day release. Now, because John was only a small-time criminal doing things like thieving or robbing, he was scared. After all, he had witnessed what Martin was capable of. So he told Martin that the gear had been confiscated when he tried to smuggle it in, which of course was a fib. So, in response, Martin Hamilton explained to John that now John was in debt and now he would need to be. This happened on 2 separate occasions. On a separate occasion, both men met at a hotel. Martin demanded money from John, who was just a petty thief, as I said. When John explained he had no money, he was again subjected to a. Now, once classed as Scotland's most dangerous criminal and Scotland's most hated criminal, Martin Hamilton was born in the northwest of Glasgow, Maryhill. His early years were spent in terrace houses on Holsworth Street, Anderston. Now, according to people who knew Martin, they says that even as a school pupil, Martin was feared and hated. No one knew when he was going to snap, so people began to avoid him. They says if people were getting on a school bus, kids at the back would use the emergency door when they saw Martin Hamilton arrive. Now, just standing at 5'5" and a pudgy frame and unassuming, Martin was not considered Mr. Big. However, he was a criminal and a gangster through and through. In 1992, Martin Hamilton had assembled a 4-man team in order to rob £30,000 from the Dumfries Building Society. Armed with blades and hammers and an imitation GUN, the gang stormed the Building Society and lay in wait for staff members to begin their shift. Only it was a setup. The bank had already been under surveillance by police. It took 5 to 10 minutes for the gang to figure this out. Now, of course, Martin was jailed for it. Upon Martin's release, he then moved to Edinburgh, and that was in 1998. At then 37 years old, Martin Hamilton had burnt all bridges in Glasgow, and he was not liked. So he wanted to continue his criminal exploits in Edinburgh. Now, some crimes that Martin Hamilton had done include the following. Between the 1st of November 1999 and January of 2000, Martin Hamilton had held a blade to a person's neck and promised to end their life. On March 2000, Martin Hamilton also promised to chop off a man's finger, and in a separate incident, Martin inserted a spoon into the eye socket of a person and then began to and then began to proceed to set them on fire. A month later, Martin had locked a man and a girl in a flat for 11 hours, where they were subjected to strikes. And on a separate incident, Martin had taken a liking to one of his dealers, so he offered the guys Class A gear, took them to the flat, and then they were stabbed. They were then put in a bathtub. According to Martin Hamilton, this was because he did not want red on his carpets. And then on a separate incident, he also took 2 men to his flat, where they were stabbed in the cheek and had boiling water poured over their frame. Now, Martin Hamilton had also struck a man in the head with a piece of wood while forcing a known gangster to lick his boots. Now, Martin was jailed for life in 2000 with a recommendation to serve 9 years. The most wanted criminal had faced 14 charges that involved GUN offences, taking people hostage, trafficking, Class A gear, and also attempted M's and the R. The 6-week trial was held in a heavily secured court in Inverness. Previous to this, Martin had been able to walk free from 12 separate offences due to witnesses being too afraid to cooperate with the police. Now, when Martin Hamilton was released from jail in September 2014, the 57-year-old gangster had robbed a big-time dealer of £75,000 worth of H. Now, Martin had become friends with drug baron Mark Richardson and used Mark's contacts in order to create a list of dealers who were worth taxing. Martin had disappeared on September 2014. Parts of him were found in a shallow area in a remote woodland near West Calder on December 2015, after being on the run for more than a year. During that time, police had offered a reward of £2,000 to find out his whereabouts. Now, it was reported that prior to his M, it was possible that Martin Hamilton had formed a connection with big-time Liverpool gangsters who used Martin Hamilton's services to collect drug debts. Martin allegedly collected a drug debt of £40,000 but did not return the money to the Liverpool gangsters, and this was retaliation. Now, police says that when they tested the skull, there was blunt force trauma. He was struck or he was shot. And again, in that area, police found the spine and the skull. And just like that, Martin Hamilton's terror was done. Stay safe. Safe.